The Galactic Linguistic Council was the most respected institution in the known universe. For over 3,000 years, scholars from every corner of space had gathered there to study languages. They had cataloged over 47,000 extinct tongues. They had translated ancient texts that were older than some stars. They believed they understood communication better than anyone else in existence. They were wrong. Park. Una did not know she was about to prove them wrong. She was just tired. It was late in the station's artificial night cycle, and she had been sorting through old files for 6 hours straight. Her back hurt. Her eyes burned. The synthetic coffee in her cup had gone cold 2 hours ago, and she was too lazy to get a fresh one. Una was 28 years old, and the youngest human working on the research station Meridian. She had earned her position through hard work and good grades, but the alien scholars never let her forget that she was junior staff. They gave her the boring jobs: filing, sorting, organizing data that nobody cared about. Tonight, she was archiving a collection of human artifacts recovered from old colony ships. Most of it was routine: ship logs, maintenance records, crew manifests. Boring stuff that made her want to fall asleep at her desk. Then she found the fragment. It was a small piece of metal, no bigger than her hand. The surface was scratched and burned, probably damaged during whatever disaster had destroyed the ship it came from. But there was writing on it. Clear, readable writing in the human alphabet. Una pulled up the council's file on the artifact. According to the records, the fragment had been recovered 80 years ago from a derelict colony ship called the Morning Star. The ship had been adrift for over 2 centuries before a salvage team found it. Everyone on board had died long ago. The file said that the council's best linguists had studied the fragment for decades. They had run it through every translation program in existence. They had consulted experts from 12 different species. Nobody could figure out what it meant. The council had classified it as Proto-Human Dialect 7X. They believed it was a ceremonial language used by early human space travelers. A dead tongue that had been lost to time. A mystery that might never be solved. Yun looked at the fragment on her screen. She read the words carved into the metal. Then she started laughing. She laughed so hard that coffee came out of her nose. She laughed until tears ran down her face. She laughed until her stomach hurt, and she had to hold on to her desk to keep from falling out of her chair. The greatest minds in the galaxy had spent 80 years trying to decode this message. They had written papers about it. They had held conferences. They had called it one of the most important linguistic puzzles of the age. And it said, "No cap, this slaps. If you're reading this, the vibe check passed. Stay based, kings." It was not a ceremonial language. It was not a dead tongue. It was not a mystery at all. It was slang. Simple, stupid, 21st century Earth slang. The kind of thing her grandmother still said when she wanted to embarrass Una at family dinners. The kind of thing humans had been saying for over 800 years, just to confuse anyone who took themselves too seriously. Una wiped her eyes and tried to calm down. She read the message again. Some kid on that colony ship had carved a meme into a piece of metal, probably as a joke. And now it sat in the most prestigious archive in the galaxy, labeled as an unsolvable ancient riddle. She should tell someone. She should report her finding to the senior scholars and explain that the great mystery was actually just a dumb joke. That was the proper thing to do, but something made her hesitate. Una pulled up more files. She searched the archive for other human artifacts that had been classified as untranslatable. There were hundreds of them. Ship logs marked as corrupted. Personal journals labeled as written in unknown dialects. Distress signals flagged as meaningless noise. She opened one at random. It was a message from a cargo ship that had gone missing 300 years ago. "Bro, the captain is Loki sus. Pretty sure he's about to do something sketchy. If anyone gets this, we need backup ASAP. This whole situation is giving bad vibes. FRFR. The Council's translation matrix had marked it as gibberish, untranslatable, probably damaged in transmission. Yuna understood every word. She opened another file. And another. And another. Each one was the same. Messages in slang. Messages in memes. Messages in the living, breathing, constantly changing language that humans actually used when they talked to each other. The aliens could not read any of it. Yuna sat back in her chair and stared at her screen. Her laughter had faded. Something cold was growing in her chest. These were not ancient mysteries. These were real messages from real people. Some of them were jokes. Some of them were personal notes. But some of them were calls for help, and nobody had answered. Nobody had even understood that they were asking. Yuna saved her files and closed her terminal. Her shift was over, but she knew she would not sleep tonight. She had too much to think about. She walked through the quiet corridors of Meridian Station, past the sleeping quarters of alien scholars who believed they knew everything about language. They had no idea what they had missed. They had no idea what she had just discovered. The greatest experts in the galaxy could not understand humanity, but Yuna could, and she was going to do something about it. Yuna did not sleep that night. She could not stop thinking about what she had found. By the time the station's artificial sun began to glow through her window, she had made a decision. She needed to investigate further. She needed to understand how deep this problem went. For the next 3 weeks, Yuna spent every free moment in the archives. She searched through thousands of human artifacts. She read messages that have been sitting untranslated for centuries. She took notes and made lists and tried to understand the full scope of what the Council had missed. What she found made her sick. The Council had over 600 human documents classified as untranslatable. Most of them were harmless. Old jokes, personal messages, love letters written in silly code words. But some of them were not harmless at all. She found 47 distress signals that had never been answered. 40-7 ships, 47 crews, thousands of people who had called for help in the only language they knew. They had used slang because that was how humans talked. They had used memes because that was how humans communicated. And nobody had understood them. One signal came from a passenger liner called the Silver Dawn. It had been carrying 300 colonists to a new world when its engines failed. "Yo, this is not a drill," the message said. "Ship is cooked. Engines are giving major L energy. We got like maybe 12 hours of air left. If anyone out there has a W to spare, please pull up. This is deadass an emergency." The Council's translation program had flagged it as corrupted audio. Probably mechanical interference, the report said. No meaningful content detected. 300 people had died waiting for help that never came. Yuna stared at her screen until her vision blurred. She thought about those colonists. She thought about their families back on Earth, who had waited years for news that never arrived. She thought about how easy it would have been for someone to translate that message. How easy it would have been to save them. If only anyone had bothered to ask a human. She could not handle this alone. She needed someone with power. Someone who could make the Council listen. Someone who was not afraid to challenge the system. She needed Kang Do-hyun. Do-hyun was a human diplomat stationed on Meridian. He was 42 years old and had spent 2 decades fighting for human interests in galactic politics. The alien delegates respected him because he was smart and stubborn. The human community loved him because he never backed down from a fight. Yuna requested a meeting. She was nervous. Do-hyun was important. He probably had better things to do than talk to a junior archivist about old files. but he agreed to see her anyway. They met in his office. It was a small room with a window that looked out at the stars. Do-hyun sat behind a simple desk covered in papers and tablets. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gray hair at his temples. He looked like someone who had been fighting battles for a very long time. "You said you found something important," he said. "Show me." Yuna connected her tablet to his screen. She showed him the fragment with the slang message. She showed him the council's report, calling it an ancient ceremonial language. She showed him her translation. Do-hyun did not laugh. He just stared at the screen for a long moment. They really thought this was ancient ritual text. He asked. "They spent 80 years studying it," Yuna said. "They wrote academic papers about it. They had conferences." Do-hyun shook his head slowly. "That is the most human thing I have ever heard." Then Yuna showed him the distress signals. She showed him the Silver Dawn. She showed him the 47 ships that had called for help in Slang and been ignored because nobody understood them. Do-hyun's expression changed. The tired amusement disappeared from his eyes. Something harder took its place. "How many?" he asked quietly. "At least 47 confirmed distress signals," Yuna said. "Probably more. I have not finished searching the archive yet." "And nobody translated them? In all these centuries?" The council decided they were corrupted data. They never asked a human to check. Don stood up from his desk. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. He was quiet for a long time. "I have worked with the council for 20 years, he said finally. "I have seen them dismiss human concerns over and over again. I have watched them treat our opinions like they do not matter. But this," he turned to face her, "this is different. This is not just arrogance. People died because of this." "Yes," Yuna said. "They did. The council will not want to admit they made a mistake. They will fight us on this. They will try to bury it." "I know," Yuna said. "That is why I came to you. I cannot do this alone." Do-hyun looked at her for a long moment. She saw something in his eyes that she had not expected. Not just anger, not just determination. Something that looked almost like hope. "You are right," he said. "You cannot do this alone. But you will not have to." He extended his hand. Yuna shook it. "We are going to make them listen," Do-hyun said. "Whatever it takes." Yuna nodded. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know how hard the fight would be. But she knew one thing for certain. She was not alone anymore. And together, they were going to change everything. The plan started small. Yuna and Do-hyun knew they could not fight the council directly. The council was too powerful, too proud. If they went public with their findings, the council would simply deny everything and bury the evidence. Deeper than before, so they decided to work in secret. They needed people. Humans who understood slang. Humans who could translate the messages that the council had ignored. Humans who were willing to take risks. Do-hyun reached out to his contacts across the galaxy. He knew humans on space stations and colony worlds and cargo ships. He knew engineers and soldiers and merchants and teachers. He told them what Yuna had discovered. He asked them to help. Most of them said yes. Within 3 months, they had a network of 37 human translators spread across council space. They called themselves the Slang Runners. The name was Yuna's idea. Do-hyun thought it sounded silly, but the others loved it. It made them feel like they were part of something exciting. Something that mattered. Their mission was simple. They would intercept human communications that the council had flagged as untranslatable. They would decode the messages. And if anyone was calling for help, they would make sure that help arrived. They could not save the people who had already died, but they could save the ones who were still alive. Bae Ji-woo was the first person to join the network after Yuna and Do-hyun. She was 31 years old and worked as an engineer on a mining outpost near the edge of human space. She had a sharp tongue and a talent for building things that were not supposed to exist. Ji-woo built the shadow network that made everything possible. She created a system that could scan council communication channels and identify flagged human messages. When the system found something, it would reroute a copy to the Slang runners before the council could delete it. It was illegal. Very illegal. If the council found out, Ji-woo would spend the rest of her life in prison. But she did not care. My cousin was on one of those ships, she told Yuna during their first call. The Bright Star, 40 people. They sent 6 distress signals over 2 weeks. Nobody came. I was 15 years old when we found out they were dead. Yuna did not know what to say. She just nodded. So yeah, Ji-woo said. I am in. Whatever you need. Yoon Taiwan was the next to join. He was 53 years old. He had spent 20 years in the human military before retiring to become a freighter captain. His ship was called the Dust Devil. It was old and ugly and could outrun almost anything in the galaxy. Taiwan did not talk much. He did not smile much either. But when Do-yoon explained what the Slang runners were doing, Taiwan agreed to help immediately. Just tell me where to go, he said. I will handle the rest. The Dust Devil became the network's mobile headquarters. When the Slang runners intercepted a distress signal, Taiwan would fly to the location and provide whatever help was needed. Sometimes that meant delivering supplies. Sometimes that meant evacuating people. Sometimes that meant dealing with problems in ways that Yuna preferred not to ask about. Their first real test came 6 months after the network was established. Ji-woo's system intercepted a message from a cargo vessel called the Lucky Fortune. The council had flagged it as corrupted audio. But when Yuna translated it, she went cold. Bro, this captain is sus for real. Pretty sure he's about to space us. We are locked in the cargo hold. 15 people. He already threw 2 guys out the airlock. Send help, no cap. This is not a joke. Please someone help us. Yuna sent the translation to Taiwan immediately. The Dust Devil was 3 days away. Too far. Way too far. But Taiwan pushed his engines harder than they were designed to go. He flew through space at speeds that should have torn his ship apart. He did not sleep. He did not eat. He just flew. He arrived at the Lucky Fortune with 4 hours to spare. The captain of the cargo vessel was a man named Grease. He was a smuggler who had been trafficking human colonists to illegal mining operations. When his cargo started to cause trouble, he decided it was easier to kill them than to deal with them. Taiwan dealt with Grease instead. The details were not pleasant. Yuna never asked for them. All she knew was that Taiwan rescued 15 people who would have died without the Slang runners. He delivered them to the nearest human colony and then went back to work like nothing had happened. Word spread quietly through the human communities. People started talking about a group of humans who could hear distress calls that nobody else understood. A group that showed up when all hope was lost. A group that spoke the language that aliens could not learn. The Slang runners became a legend. More people asked to join. Engineers and pilots and doctors and teachers. Humans who wanted to help their own kind. Humans who were tired of being ignored by the galaxy. The network grew to 50 people. Then 70. Then over 100. They saved 23 ships in the first year. 41 in the second. They stopped traffickers and pirates and corrupt captains. They reunited families and rescued stranded colonists and answered calls for help that had been echoing in the void for weeks. Yuna coordinated everything from her small office on Meridian Station. She still worked her day job in the archives. She still filed reports and sorted data and did all the boring tasks that the alien scholars assigned her. But at night, she was the heart of a resistance, movement that was changing everything. She had never felt more alive. But she also knew that their luck could not last forever. The bigger they grew, the more attention they attracted. Sooner or later, the council would notice, and when that day came, they would need to be ready. The day Una had feared arrived on a quiet morning in the third year of the Slang runners. She was working at her desk when the security officers came for her. There were 4 of them, big aliens with hard faces and weapons on their belts. They did not explain anything. They just told her to come with them. Una did not resist. She had always known this was a possibility. She had prepared for it as best she could. But her hands still shook as they led her through the corridors of Meridian Station. They took her to the main council chamber. It was a massive room with seats rising in circles around the central platform. Usually, the chamber was used for debates about language policy and academic disputes. Today, it was being used for something else, a trial. The seats were filled with delegates from across the galaxy. Hundreds of alien scholars and politicians stared down at Una as the guards brought her to the platform in the center. She felt very small standing there alone. Councillor Thren presided over the proceedings. He was a Veluxi, a species known for their intelligence and their pride. He stood nearly 3 meters tall with 4 eyes and blue-gray skin that shifted colors when he was angry. Right now, his skin was very dark blue. Thren had been one of the scholars who had studied the Slang artifact for decades. He had written papers claiming it was ancient ceremonial text. He had built his reputation on that mystery, and Una had made him look like a fool. "Park Una of Earth," Thren said. His voice echoed through the chamber. "You are charged with cultural interference, unauthorized manipulation of archival data, and operating an illegal communication network within council space. How do you answer these charges?" Una looked up at the hundreds of faces staring down at her. Most of them were hostile. Some were curious. A few looked sympathetic, but they were far outnumbered. "I did what was necessary," she said. Her voice was steady. "People were dying because you could not understand them." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Thren's skin darkened further. "You admit to your crimes, then," he said. "You admit to interfering with council archives. You admit to operating a secret network behind our authority." "I admit to saving lives," Una said. "Over 100 ships in 3 years. Thousands of people who would be dead if we had waited for the council to understand their calls for help." "That is not your judgment to make," Thren said. "The council has protocols. The council has procedures. You are a junior archivist. You do not have the authority to decide what messages are important. Your protocols let people die," Una said. "Your procedures classified distress signals as meaningless noise. Your experts spent 80 years studying a meme and calling it ancient wisdom." The murmur grew louder. Several delegates looked uncomfortable. Thren raised a hand for silence. "Humanity is a young species," he said. "Your language is unstable. It changes constantly. It cannot be reliably preserved or studied. That is not the council's fault. That is simply the nature of human communication." "It is not unstable," Una said. "It is alive. It grows and changes because we grow and change. That is not a weakness. That is what makes us human." "And that is precisely the problem," Thren said. "A language that refuses to stay fixed cannot be properly archived. A culture that constantly reinvents itself cannot be trusted to communicate clearly. The Slang runners are proof of this chaos. You have undermined the integrity of our entire system." Una took a deep breath. She had known this moment would come. She had practiced what she would say. But now that she was here, all her prepared speeches seemed pointless. So she tried something different. She spoke in slang. "Listen up," she said. switching from formal galactic standard to the language that the Council could not understand. I know you are big mad right now. I know I made you look bad. But here is the tea. Your archives are full of human voices, and you called them dead because you could not vibe with how we talk. That is not scholarship. That is just lazy. The translation matrix in the chamber sputtered. Delegates looked at each other in confusion. The words came through as broken fragments that made no sense. Yuna continued. You want to understand humanity? You do not get to freeze us in amber like museum pieces. We change. We adapt. We make up new words when the old ones stop working. That is literally the whole point of being human. Thren's skin had turned almost black with anger. This is exactly what I mean, he said. You cannot even speak properly before the Council. You resort to gibberish and expect us to understand. It is not gibberish, Yuna said. It is my language. The language my grandmother speaks. The language my friends use. The language that ships full of dying people used when they called for help. You just never bothered to learn it. She looked around the chamber at all the alien faces staring down at her. You say human language is unstable. But maybe the problem is not us. Maybe the problem is that the greatest linguistic scholars in the galaxy never thought to ask a human what they meant. The chamber was silent. Yuna straightened her shoulders and looked directly at Thren. You can punish me if you want. Lock me up. Make an example of me. But it will not change anything. Humans will keep talking the way we talk. And if you cannot understand us, that is not our problem. She paused. That is yours. The delegates began to murmur again. This time, it was not hostile. It was uncertain, confused. Some of them were looking at Thren with expressions that seemed almost doubtful. Yuna had said what she needed to say. Now she could only wait to see what would happen next. The Council debated for 7 days. Yuna spent that time in a holding cell on Meridian Station. It was not a bad cell. The bed was comfortable. The food was decent. But she could not contact anyone. She could not find out what was happening. She could only wait and wonder if she would spend the rest of her life in prison. Do-Yun was allowed to visit her once. He looked tired but hopeful. Something is changing, he told her through the barrier that separated them. The delegates are talking. Not just about you. About everything? About how the Council has treated humans for centuries. About all the mistakes that nobody wanted to admit. Will it be enough? Yuna asked. Do-Yun shook his head. I do not know. But you did something that nobody else could do. You made them listen. On the 7th day, the guards came to Yuna's cell again. This time, they did not take her to the Council chamber. They took her to a small conference room where Thren was waiting alone. The counselor looked different. Older somehow. His skin was a pale gray color that Yuna had never seen before. He did not seem angry anymore. He seemed exhausted. The Council has reached a decision, Thren said. His voice was quiet. It was not unanimous. Many delegates wanted to make an example of you. They saw your actions as an insult to everything the Council represents. Yuna said nothing. She just waited. But others argued differently, Thren continued. They pointed out that human space is expanding. Human trade is becoming more important every year. Human communications are vital to galactic operations. We cannot afford to keep misunderstanding you. He paused. The Council has voted to dismiss all charges against you. Yuna blinked. She had not expected that. Furthermore, Thren said, the Council has decided to establish a new division within the linguistic archives. It will be called the Living Language Bureau. Its purpose will be to study and translate evolving human vernacular in real time, to ensure that no human message is ever misclassified again. Yuna stared at him. You are creating a department for slang? We are creating a department for living languages, Thren said. Human languages. Languages that change and grow and refuse to stay fixed. His four eyes looked at her steadily. The council has chosen you to lead this department. Yuna did not know what to say. She had come to this station as a junior archivist. She had expected to spend years filing reports and sorting data before anyone took her seriously. Now she was being offered control of an entire division. Why me? She finally asked. Thren was quiet for a long moment. Because you were right, he said. I spent 80 years studying that artifact. I wrote papers about it. I built my career on it. And a junior translator looked at it for 3 seconds and understood what I never could. His skin shifted to a lighter shade of gray. Something like shame. I was arrogant, he said. We all were. We believed that because we had studied language for millennia, we understood everything there was to know. We never considered that some languages might require a different kind of understanding. He stood up from his chair. You have shown us our mistake. Now it is your responsibility to help us fix it. Yuna accepted the position. She did not really have a choice. This was bigger than her. This was bigger than the Slang runners. This was a chance to change how the entire galaxy understood humanity. The living language. Bureau officially opened 3 months later. Yuna was its director. Do-Hyun became the official human liaison to the council, ensuring that human interests were represented in all linguistic policy decisions. Jiwoo's shadow network was legitimized and integrated into council communication systems. Taiwan was offered a position too, but he turned it down. I am too old for meetings, he said. Just call me when you need someone to fly. The bureau grew quickly. Humans from across the galaxy applied to join. Translators and teachers and people who had grown up speaking the ever-changing languages of Earth colonies and space stations. People who understood that language was not something you preserved in a museum. It was something you lived. Within 5 years, the Bureau had translated over 20,000 previously flagged documents. They found jokes and love letters and personal journals. They found records of friendships and rivalries and ordinary human lives. They found history that had been locked away for centuries simply because nobody had understood the words. They also found more distress signals. More ships that had called for help and been ignored. More people who had died waiting for rescue that never came. Yuna made sure that every one of those ships was documented. Every name was recorded. Every story was preserved. She could not bring those people back, but she could make sure they were not forgotten. On the first anniversary of the Bureau's opening, Yuna returned to the archive where everything had started. She found the original artifact, the small piece of burned metal with the message that had changed her life. No cap, this slaps. If you're reading this, the vibe check passed. Stay based, kings. She looked at those words for a long time. She thought about the person who had written them. Some young human on a colony ship 800 years ago. Someone who had carved a joke into a piece of metal just because they could. Someone who had no idea that their words would travel across centuries and eventually help change the galaxy. Yuna picked up a stylus. Carefully, she added her own message below the original text. Message received. We stayed based. Yuna, 2847. She put the artifact back in its case and returned it to the shelf. Somewhere out there, human ships were flying through space. Human voices were calling out across the void. And for the first time in galactic history, someone was actually listening. The greatest experts in the universe had spent centuries trying to understand humanity. In the end, all they had to do was ask.